For the great Mexican-American War. Hard to believe that was so many years ago, but of course I went through 11 presidents in this United States of America. That was only one of 11, and that was President Polk. And my young girlhood, oh, when I look back at my young girlhood, growing up as a Quaker girl there in Virginia, but having been born, of course, in North Carolina. Do any of you know that I was born in North Carolina and not in Virginia, the land of presidents? No one knew that. Well, that's just as well, because I consider Virginia my home. Well, you are so lovely today. It feels like my Wednesday evening squeezes. But I would invite everyone to the White House for a little repast and something to drink, and of course my hospitality. I wanted everyone in America to feel free to come to the White House, because the White House is your house, not just the President's house. And I was delighted when everyone came to see me, as well as my wonderful husband, President Madison. Well, when I look back on my life, and I realized, she said, that I gave great offense by the shape of my caps, and the length of my gown, and the shape of my shoes. I have lectured her at length, she said, about all of this. And Dolly smiles while I am talking, and then she falls asleep. I didn't like those kinds of rules, but of course that would change in just a few years. Well, when the year of 1983 came about, and this was when, of course, the United States officially was given the peace treaty from England, and we were officially the United States of America. When that happened, my father let all of his slaves go in the fields, and that was called manumission. And of course, that was something that the Quakers decided to do, just to let all of their slaves go. And that was a wonderful idea. I thought that was absolutely marvelous, but let me tell you, our ability to make money after that suddenly went rather down. because his father had started a starch business there in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, and at this time, it was the capital of the United States of America. Yes, I'll tell you what, this city, which was a capital, going to be a capital for about 10 years until about 1890, when we moved it all to that swamp town called Washington, D.C. Philadelphia was like the cosmopolitan city of the United States. It was like Paris to us, although most of us had never been to Paris or to London. And all of the clothing, it was so beautiful to me as a young girl. I looked in the windows and I just thought, oh, I would love to dress in high fashion. And I would love to be someone special someday. And as it was, because I did wear my hats a little differently, and my shoes a little differently, although no makeup or anything of that nature, I was called a wet Quaker. That means I took liberties with everything. Well, my father, being a very strong and strict Quaker as he was, going to Quaker meeting houses all the time, when his business started to fail, it affected the entire family, including my mother, my beautiful mother, Mary Coles. And Mary was very distressed by this. I was distressed, and all of my family was distressed, but what could we do? So Mother opened a boarding house. That was the most wonderful thing that ever happened. You know, God has a hand in our destiny, and I never in my growing up years got to sing to my children because singing was considered very satanic, especially to children. So I will sing a simple little cradle song, and then you will know how much I loved my son. All of his life, he was my precious boy. You're a quiet audience today. How nice. You can be more joyous if you want. It's good night, lullaby. Tuck my baby on the soft down, on the starlight from the sky. Shine upon my little face. Good night, lullaby, while the night shadows creep. Rock-a-bye, rock-a-bye, sleep, my little baby, sleep. It's good night, sleep tight, tuck my baby on the soft lace. Starlight from afar, shine upon his little face. Lullaby, lullaby, sleep, my little, sleep. Lullaby, lullaby, sleep, my little one, please sleep. Well, with that train going by, I don't know what to think about. You know, trains were a wonderful invention that happened toward the end of my life. When I was a young girl growing up and going about Virginia and up to Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, we had carriages everywhere. We also had stagecoaches, and they were mighty uncomfortable indeed. So I traveled mostly by carriage and stagecoach. Not by railroad. But I'm delighted to see the train out there going by and going by then going by. I dare say that's how long it took to ratify the Constitution. And of course, if it hadn't been for my future husband, James Madison, Oh my, it probably never would have passed, but that was why they have the Bill of Rights. Well, that is what America is about. We are a free people, and she was walking with the great little Madison, as he was called, because he was short in stature, but not in mental ability. He was the brightest man in the entire nation. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And he noticed me, and he turned around, and I'll never forget him turning around and looking, you know. And then he bowed because he wasn't a Quaker, he was an Episcopalian, and Episcopalians, they believe that their religion is only for gentlemen, of course. And he tipped his hat at me, and then I got a notice. Would I entertain the great little Madison? And I said, I would be delighted to have him come to my home, and he did. He came to my home, and I know you're all hot. Remember, I don't believe in purgatory, but now I'm beginning to wonder if I should. It is warm in here, and I'm so sorry. But at any rate, if you focus on what I'm saying, the heat will maybe dissipate in your dreams. Mr. Madison, oh, Mr. Madison, what he didn't do. He met me, and they say within an hour I had captured his heart. And my cousin wrote to me, oh, now for Mr. Madison, my cousin Catherine said, he told me that I might say what I pleased you about him. He thinks so much of you in the day that he has lost his tongue. And at night he dreams of you and starts in his sleep calling on you. 42 years of marriage we would have together. How I love him. There in Washington, D.C. Excuse me. The army of the British, 4,000 strong, came up at Pax. Say all of a sudden, the heat has got to me. Up the river, up to Bladensburg, and up there, they arrived, they unloaded their troops, and they were looking for someone to fight. And we took our few little 400, maybe 1,000 men up there to greet them. And my husband left that day. It was in August. Oh my word, I can't believe it. It was August 1814, the 24th of August, 1814. He says, my dear, will you be safe here at the White House? I said, absolutely. He said, don't come back. I won't come back until I come to get you, so stay here. And so I said I would wait for him, and you know I had absolutely no fear of the British coming in. Nothing bothered me. I put a my bed every night. I wasn't worried about anything. And remember, I was brought up a Quaker, you know, one who doesn't fight, and one who doesn't believe in war, and so forth and so on. And so I said, no, my darling, you go off with the troops. He said, I must address the troops there at Ladysburg. And so I said, I will be here. I will hold down the fort. And so that's what I would do. And I had 100 men at that time watching the White House. They wouldn't last very long. They eventually took off too. And they left 14 cannons behind, if that gives you an idea. Probably all the cannons we owned was right there at the White House. And my major domo, who was French, she said, I'm going to light those cannons so if the British come into Washington, D.C., and they would dare to come into the White House, I'm going to have it lit so that they all blow up. I said, well, let's hold off on that idea. And so I started writing letters to friends. And I said, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I've got the important papers in all of the carriages, including Mr. Madison's copy of the Constitution of the United States and other important papers. The Declaration of Independence and the original Constitution signed by all of the Senate and the representatives, that was in the hands of the War Department at that time, and they took those documents out right before I would flee from the city itself. So you see, I was thinking ahead here, getting as many important papers, and then I had my bird, Polly. Now, our parrot, Polly, had to go with us too. That was Mr. Madison's best friend, and it was the only friend that would swear in his presence, and where he got those swear words, I have no idea. My husband left me yesterday morning to join General Winder. He inquired anxiously whether I had the courage or the firmness to remain in the President's house until his return on the morrow or the succeeding day. And I told him, do not worry, I will take care of everything. He desires that I should be ready, however, at a moment's notice to enter my carriage and leave the city. I have pressed as many cabinet papers as I possibly can into the trunks and into the carriages, and our private property will have to be sacrificed, unfortunately. I am determined not to go myself until I see Mr. Madison safe, until I see the whites of his eyes, I said. Well, I saw something white, but it wasn't his eyes. It was the underwear of the British coming in. But anyway, I am determined not to go myself, so my friends and acquaintances, however, have all deserted me. Oh, I have always been an advocate for fighting, but this is one time where I am very aware of the fact that I need my Tunisian sword. I wrote to Mrs. Benjamin Latrobe. I confess I was so unfeminine as to be free from fear. Oh, 3 o'clock, I wrote my sister, oh dear sister, we've had a little battle or skirmish near Bladensburg, and I'm still here within sound of the cannon. Mr. Madison comes not. May God protect him. 2 messengers covered with dust came to bid me fly, but I still wait for him. And I would go to the attic of the White House and take my little telescope, and I would look around there and say, well, I do see some dust in the distance. I hear lots of cannon, and I do not see Mr. Madison. Where is he? Where is he? And then all of a sudden, I saw the entire American army fleeing from Bladensburg and coming through the city with a roar of dust in every direction. I put up my telescope, and I said, well, I'm still waiting. Thus, I got my parrot ready to go, and I said, we must needs take down the portrait. And so one of my servants, his name was Paul Jennings, he was my husband's manservant, and he would eventually write about his escapades there in the White House years later as a free man. I said, take out the portrait of George Washington. I cannot leave without that portrait. If that portrait is here and the British come in, we are doomed. They will parade that around the London Capitol. And I said, that cannot happen. We must give honor to our President, George Washington. We all were very highly esteemed of him. And so that was, unfortunately, could not be taken out of the frame. So I said, then cut it out. And we rolled it up, and 2 men from New York City came to my door, and I said, can you take this portrait with you when you cross the ferry into Virginia. And they said, we will do that. And they took it to New York City, that portrait. And I said, yes, that's taken care of. That's very, very good. Now, what else must I take? Oh, yes, the red velvet curtains. Take the curtains down. And so Paul Jennings took my big velvet curtains down, and we put them and stuffed them in a trunk, and we put them into one of my carriages, and I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to see what will happen. And finally, a freed black man, came to my door and he says, Mrs. Madison, it is time for you to leave. And I thought to myself, well, if General Cockburn of the British Army, or the sailing ships I should say, he was an admiral, if Cockburn comes in, he said he might capture me and take me and parade me around London as his special little find here in America. I don't want that to happen. And then he said he would burn down the White House around me. I said, I guess we must needs go then. I don't want Cockburn to get his wish granted. So I got into the carriage and we took off for Georgetown on all the bouncy, old, rutted roads, because we had terrible roads in those days. Got there and we stopped at the Davenport House, and today the Davenport House is known for harboring Dolley Madison. They gave me a little bite to eat, they gave me some tea for 5 minutes, but oh, have they made history. They make a lot of money off of that house today, because they rescued me. And then I got back in the carriage, and we crossed the ferry there at Georgetown, and I got to the other side of the Potomac River, and that's when I said, stop the carriage. I got out, and I had a little meltdown for about 2 minutes, cried my eyes out, and I said, where is Mr. Madison? Then I got back in the carriage, and we took off to a home there in the Virginia countryside where I would be kept safe, and the next day Mr. Madison found me, and we were reunited. But in the meantime, the British had come in, just as they said they were going to do. They burned down the Capitol, they burned down the White House, but before they burned down the White House, of course, you realize I had a dinner party set on the table for 40 people, thinking my husband was coming back. All the beautiful liqueurs and wines were on the table, beautiful dinner places set there for them. And so Cockburn had a wonderful meal, and they played with my husband's cockade cap, and they took off with it. They took off with his walking stick. And it was Cockburn himself who said, ah, Mrs. Madison made these beautiful little embroidered seats around the dining room table. I'm going to sit on her seat. And I'm going to keep this beautiful little cushion for my souvenir of Mrs. Madison. And so that's what he did. And then he ushered everyone out of the house. He said, light the fires. Take all of Latrobe's beautiful Federalist furniture, all that Roman-style furniture, French things all over the house. Put it in a pile and burn it. And that's exactly what he did. And you would look for ages around the city. For miles and miles, you could see the flames of the Capitol and the White House burning. And the next day, I said, oh, what confusion, what sadness. I would like to take the British and put them in a pit of hell, is what I said. And that is the only time I ever swore in my life. And if you can believe that. We had a peace treaty already signed by Great Britain, calling it a draw. The war was over. But had he not won that battle down there, I don't think we would have the Mississippi today and that port safe for Americans today. But Andrew Jackson, of course, would be a president in the future. And now you know about the War of 1812, which lasted for 2 whole years. And Mr. Madison, they always called it Mr. Madison's War when they were angry at him. Oh, he started this war. But now everyone was elated that the President of the United States, James Madison, had saved the day, and we became more American than we had ever become in any other time in history. Now we have a unified country. You know, when the British burned us down in Washington, D.C., that made the rest of the country so mad that it unified us as a whole. When we have problems in this country, when we stand together, that's when we're strong. When we divide, a divided house cannot stand. We must be one house, one union, and that's what Madison prayed for at the very end of his life. This little song we'll do next. When we went back to beautiful, beautiful Montpelier after we left the White House. I have to tell you, we were there for many, many years, and Mr. Madison put all of his papers together, and all of the notes from the meetings, putting the Constitution together. He had all those notes. He had 23 volumes of papers toward the end of his life, and I helped him to edit those, if you can imagine. And because of all those papers and all that he stood for, he said, oh, that we would never be divided. He didn't know the Civil War was around the country. And I pray to God that this country is not foolish enough to have another Civil War, but will realize the millions of people that have died for this country, bled for this country. That's why the red is on the flag, for the blood of the people who have died for this country. Please remember that. Please talk to people. Please let them know. You may not be happy today, but tomorrow you will be happier. I say no more. We become political. I mustn't become political. We're going to get out a little song now because, you know, Mr. Madison would pass away at 85 years old there at Montpelier. And when he did, it was a sad time. I couldn't even go to his funeral. And his little obelisk was there in the cemetery, there in Montpelier. I just couldn't go. He was the greatest man I would ever know in my life. He was my counselor, my protector, my president. Let's do this little song together, and in the middle part, I will read what happened to my beloved on the last day that he lived. And then we will do the last verse together. First verse. I would leave Montpelier a year later and go back to Washington, D.C. for the last 16 years of my life. I would live in a little house right near Lafayette Square. And by the way, Lafayette came to my house in Montpelier. I was so happy to entertain me 25 years after the Revolutionary War. But there I would be near the White House again. And I would see various presidents come and go, 11 of them all told, and the last one was President Polk. And you will see that when I went back to Washington, D.C., they treated me like the Queen again. Queen Dolley, they called me, Queen Dolley. And I was invited to the White House many times with President Polk and his wife. And I was so happy to be a part of this great country. Imagine a little girl with the American Revolutionary War, the first president of the United States, and then 11 presidents later. I was still alive. And so when Matthew Brady took my picture next to President Polk, I'm a blur in the background because he would get other portraits of me, but sadly enough, I was wearing an old turban and the same dress and the same shawl in every picture. It was Paul Jennings who would come to my house and bring a basket of food because they said I was living in curious times. I was living in poverty, all because of the wonderful son that I gave birth to, John Todd. There was a congressman that said, Mr. Todd was to Melchior what the serpent was to the Garden of Eden. I lost Melchior because I had to pay his debts of gambling and drinking and carousing, and he never amounted to money. They say he died 2 years after I did, completely deranged. And I would recommend that as a grandparent or a parent, that you discipline your children more. I was too appeasing. I was good for the Congress, but I was not good for my son growing up. And so people would bring food to the house. All Guinness was for a short time purchased by Mr. Webster himself, Daniel Webster, that is. And then he bought his own freedom and with his own money. With his own money, he bought food and feed me. That's how it was. So when the Congress found out what was going on in my life, they said, we will buy all Mr. Madison's papers for $20,000, but we're going to put it in a trust fund and give it to you a little at a time. That made my son so angry. He said, I'm going to go up to D.C. and I'm going to march on the Congress and I'm going to shoot every one of them. And I wrote back to him, I said, 5 years son, do not think of departing and separating me from my last gift to this life, and that's my friends, the Congress, the representatives in the Senate. Don't you dare do that. I have nothing more to say to you, is what I finally told him. So the very last year of my life, I had a little bit of money to live on. And they say that my beautiful grandniece took care of me, my great niece. Lucienne Payne Cutts was her name. And she loved me so much, she wrote a book about me, the first biography about me. And she was there at my bedside the last 2 days of my life, and they said I suffered a stroke, but you wouldn't have known it. I just couldn't get out of bed, but I still had a smile on my face. And I would call out, my counselor, oh my counselor, where are you? I have so much to ask you. I'm looking forward to seeing you, my counselor. That was Jimmy. And then my son came to my bedside too, and I said, oh, my poor boy, my poor boy. And so when I passed away, they said my funeral was the grandest funeral that had ever taken place in Washington, D.C. up to that time. I was now an Episcopalian, and hundreds and thousands of people lined by my little coffin and gave their respects to the woman that they said was the last great institution in the United States. Well, if you just live every day as unto God and you do the right thing, things will work out. Always do. Never do the wrong thing. And you will be given honor at the end of your life. And yes, my friends, I even know now that I'm up there with Jimmy, that the red velvet curtains were made into that beautiful red dress there. So there's still hope for my red velvet curtains. That is for sure.